All right, so we've got a few more people still logging in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I want to thank everybody for attending our short webinar on IT noise reduction. We are NetEnrich, and we work with over 1,400 clients, helping them eliminate the noise in their system. Even though some of our clients are the size of a GE and a T-Mobile and a Disney, really the majority of companies that we work directly with are the mid-market size companies, just like the individuals that are on the call listening in today. So my name is Jim Staley, and I am the Director of Business Development. We also have Wes Umamura, our lead architect, who's with us, and he will walk us through a few of the slides. So we really hold these clinics on a regular basis, touching on topics that we see in the market with our clients and prospects. Sometimes when prospects reach out to us or we reach out to them, they don't have much time for a one-on-one or an in-house, so we kind of hold these clinics that again last about 20 minutes to give you an overview of what exactly is going on with us and what we may be able to do to partner up with you to help you in your IT world. Our goal really is to share the information while giving you ideas of what you can do to implement on your own with your organization. So lately we've seen a number of clients dealing with an explosion of alerts coming from monitoring in logging systems. Clients are dealing with implementation of new systems and technologies by the business. If it's AWS or application monitoring tools or even external web performance monitors, each coming with its own alerting model and with the need to be responded to when an alert is raised. IT may have not even known some of these issues, alerts, and other problems exist, yet obviously if IT doesn't acknowledge and respond to these issues as well as prevent outages, IT's credibility is damaged, so in turn, anybody in your IT environment, your credibility could be damaged as well. So let me kick over to the next slide here. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Wes, and he will walk us through specific examples of the problems that IT is facing, the steps any company can really take to resolve these issues, as well as a sample real-life example of what may be going on in your environment today, as well as other IT individuals. If you have any questions, please either chat them to us or fill out the question box and we will try to answer them. And then at the end, after Wes is finished with his slides, I'll come back and close out the presentation with a little information about NetEnrich and Vistara. Wes, are you ready?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Hi, my name is Wes, and while this slide really is, we'll just use it as an agenda slide, and just to briefly introduce myself, I'm a 4 to 5 year veteran with NetEnrich. A lot of my activity is around implementation of our services and some of the platforms and the tools that we use. So we've had engagements with some of our small and mid-size customers and partners, and all the way up to some of our enterprise clients as well. So probably some of the examples I'll be drawing from will be a little bit more from the enterprise side, but I think they do apply across the board. Let's go to the next slide, please, Jim. So the title of the slide is IT noise reduction, and the notion is that we're making a declarative statement there by saying, you know, every month we're seeing more alarms and log entries, that kind of thing. There are few situations, engagements that we have with customers or prospective customers anymore in which they're just static, in which they have, you know, everything's in place, they have the right size team in place, and everything just kind of works like clockwork. Anymore, what we see is that because of variables within businesses and growth, perhaps it might be through acquisition, it may be a new, you know, a new product, a new division. In many cases, it's because the messaging across the industry, and when I say across the industry, I'm not talking about just infrastructure, but I am talking about applications, as Jim was making reference to, and about cloud, the cloud environment, those kinds of things. the messaging is that you must monitor, and you must have a certain level of awareness to what's going on within those environments. And so what we're seeing is that more and more that messaging is hitting, and teams that are deploying those things, applications or moving into the cloud, are making monitoring solutions or identifying monitoring solutions, and those in terms are generating alerts and alarms. And where do they end up? Well, they end up in, they may end up with those teams specifically in some cases, but certainly in terms of an IT operational view, they end up with an organization that says, now I've got all these alerts and I don't know what to do with them. In many cases, there's a little communication about the value of it. There's a little communication about what kind of response the NOC, for example, needs to have to those alerts. How did they escalate? What kind of standard operating procedures associated with those, et cetera, et cetera. So we have this effect that we're referring to here as IT alert fatigue. You become desensitized to those alerts. And your L1, L2 engineers go home at the end of the day saying, you know, I know there was a bunch of alerts in there, nothing happened, maybe it's okay. And it's not okay, right? But they're saying, you know, you just become desensitized. And so what we're suggesting here is, because of that volume of alerts, you have the possibility of your SLAs being negatively impacted. We have a statement down at the bottom of the slide to suggest that that in fact happens, and your SLAs could be notification agreements. They could be related to remediation of an outage. Your mean time becomes longer, etc. So all of this kind of compiles, and a lot of it really, frankly, is because you just have this overwhelming body of alerts that we don't know what to do with. Let's go to the next slide, please.
Okay, Wes, we have a question that popped in here real quick.
Okay.
So my company can handle most of the alerts we see timely. Why is this an issue now?
I think in partly because of what I was suggesting earlier, is that there's a changing environment. In other words, few businesses are static. I might be able to see the alerts now, but there may become a day when we'll take on a new division, we might purchase a new, acquire a new organization, take on a new data center, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're not prepared to be able to manage that, we'll just get overwhelmed. So our recommendation is to maintain, is to treat it as though you always have an opportunity to improve, not only improve your responses and just make sure you're meeting your SLAs, but to improve the working environment in which you have your L1, L2, L3 engineers operating. I think it's more of a foresight type of an issue.
Okay. All right, great. Let's go to the next one.
So when we look at this particular slide here, what we're going to see is this notion of how can we begin to address this overwhelming body of alerts. And what our first recommendation is to determine where the source of those alarms and those alerts and where they're coming from. If at all possible, we're recommending to pull them all together into one single unified view. So in other words, have this, what we tend to refer to as a single pane of glass, that allows me to be able to see everything in one place, and that in turn allows me to identify some relationships between perhaps disparate technologies and those kinds of things. If that is not possible, then we're recommending just doing some analysis and break it down, get an output, perhaps into a spreadsheet such as Excel, of the alerts that are being generated from your respective monitoring solutions, categorize them. In other words, identify the nature of those alerts, rationalize them, and by that I'm suggesting that making sense out of, am I seeing common alerts coming from the same source? Within a given period of time, am I seeing various devices that are generating alerts over that same period of time? And can I make some association of that? And obviously, I know my own infrastructure, so I should know if a given router, say, or switch is associated with a server and those kinds of things. And then how do I how I can start eliminating alerts that are maybe unnecessary, that are being generated, that are noise related. And so on that fifth step, then I start to drill down in what we're calling real noise. So in other words, are there some events that are being generated because a maintenance window hasn't been respected? And we believe it's incredibly important to be able to identify those windows if at all possible, to turn off alerting during that period of time so that we're not generating unnecessary alerts. Can I ignore, for X number of instances, alerts that are being generated? Do I have some kind of mechanism in place that conceivably those alerts will heal? In other words, they'll stop over a period of time because conditions will change over time. And is that possible? And we have a bullet item here. Can I change some thresholds to reduce the noise? And I guess I would strongly caution that thinking, and that the thinking is that the thresholds don't exist for me to be able to reduce noise. The thresholds exist for me to be able to identify a warning or a critical condition. So I need to make sure that I have those thresholds set appropriately. And then I want my processes and my response to be able to help address the reason for those thresholds being met on a consistent basis. So lastly, processes could be a technical process. It could be a standard operating procedure. But I would also suggest that it could also have to do with internal governance. And it could have to do with my processes from the bottom up within my IT operation, and making sure that the organization is informed and that they're aware of what we're dealing with here from an alert perspective. Let's go to the next slide, please, Jim. There are some additional considerations that I can have, and that is, how can I maybe respond more effectively besides doing kind of the manual process that we just described? And is there some way that I can automate my responses? So my standard operating procedures, for a given alert, do I have a high level of certainty that the response is always going to be the same? I have a given failure, I'm aware of it, and this may even be a workaround, but I'm aware of that failure, and I know that if I restart a service, it's going to address that failure. And say, for example, if I have a CPU spiking and there's a service that's running that is a cause of that, and I know it's harmless for me to restart it, let's just do that on a regular basis. I could script that, right, instead of having to go in and manually run that on an ongoing basis. Can I associate that with that alert? Can I automate processes in a similar way? If there is a body of alerts that are generated, and I know with a high level of certainty that I'm going to have to generate a ticket in order to be able to get to address that, and maybe the ticket is just a matter of tracking this particular alert, making sure that as the workflow passes on to a given engineer, that they follow the procedures, et cetera, but can I automate that process? And then as I look both upstream and downstream, what we're suggesting is that from the time of creation of a given instance, for the life cycle of a device, say for example a server, to the time that perhaps it's no longer necessary, it's no longer needed, then can I automate my processes in terms of the monitors that are applied, the characteristics that we're looking for, and those kinds of things? Do I always have to have a manual interaction with that? And lastly, we talk about service dependency mapping, and is there some way that I can associate relationships up and down within my infrastructure and my platform and even my applications? So just for example, if I had a login application and I refer to that as and I want to monitor that, and there are certain services that are supporting that, can I associate those services with that login application? And if that application resides within a given device or servers, can I make associations there? So if I can see those relationships, then I know that if that particular server goes down, it's going to impact that particular application.
Okay, Wes, I had actually two similar questions come in. Basically, they're wanting to know if you can just briefly describe what a service map is.
Yeah, so a service map really is based on when referring to as a service. And a service is really just a logical entity that is associated with perhaps an infrastructure element. It could be a drive or something that we can touch and feel, something that has an IP address, or an application, or even some kind of a process. And the mapping, what that does is it allows us to be able to, again, to see that relationship. So as I described the login application, I may have a segment of code that is associated with capturing user input, putting in some kind of a variable for both their login and their password, those kinds of things. But that code then is associated with operating system elements, and there's some services that need to be supported, and libraries that need to be in place, et cetera, et cetera. And then there also needs to be, underneath that, supporting infrastructure. So again, the mapping allows us to be able to draw those relationships and to be able to see if one goes down, how it's going to negatively impact, ultimately, my application is supporting that login.
Okay, very good, thanks. You ready to move on?
Sure. So we have a real live example, and our example is based on an experience with an enterprise grade customer of ours. We took a window of time, and in that window of time we captured, we were able to identify that there was, within that window of time, there were 700,000 alerts, just raw alerts that were being generated. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide that those alerts, some of the devices that were a source of that. There's some networking devices that's represented by the SolarWinds icon. We had some storage devices, the HP and the EMC. There was some virtualization, and then in System Center was also part of that particular environment. I think there was more, but just kind of give you a big picture idea. And all those then were pulled together. We happen to have a technology platform that we OEM. That was part of that. We pulled it together in that platform as a single pane of glass. So our first step really was to go through really predominantly 3 areas, and you see that there was some automation that was in place. So in other words, we had some runbooks that were pretty standard responses to those alerts. Those, in fact, some of those runbook responses then caused those alerts to go away, and essentially the thresholds were dropped based on that. Then we had also some workflow automation. So in other words, there were some processes that were part of that to be able to address those alerts, and tickets were generated automatically based on some of the alerts. And then lastly, there was some workload automation. So in other words, we had the ability to be able to designate and identify the appropriate engineers that those could go to. So the gist of that is that 21,000 tickets were then passed on to our L1, or excuse me, were passed on to the next step, essentially. And we weeded down out of that 700,000 alerts, we came up with about 21,000 tickets. Those 21,000 tickets in the blue shaded area, 11, just shy of 12,000 of them then were broken down between severity levels, from most severe being P0s, of course, all the way up to the P3s. And some of those tickets then we were able to pass along to vendors, so like networking vendors or storage vendors, and it was something that they needed to address. But in many cases then we were able to use, again, standard operating procedures, maybe scripting applied in a way that it was something that couldn't be automatically associated with the alert initially, but an engineer had to take a look at it and do a little bit of triaging and determining what the best SOP would be to apply. And so that was done at that particular level. Those tickets then, those in turn were pared down to 9,000 tickets, and this is going to essentially to an L2 level type of a group. Those engineers then were recipient of 8,755 tickets, and they essentially proceeded with the troubleshooting process in which they remediated those tickets. Out of that then, there was 120 tickets that essentially went to the senior level engineers at L3 for problem management. And the point that we're trying to make with this is by addressing really out of the gate that significant body of alerts, we were able to really pinpoint our activity and be more specific about what needed to be addressed within the remaining panes, as you see in the blue shaded areas. Can we go on to the next one, Jim? So the outcomes, we have some general numbers that we work with in terms of our experience, our body of experience with our clients, and we're suggesting that mean time to repair can be reduced significantly by addressing that huge body of alerts out of the gate, and what we're referring to as noise. And it makes sense, right? If you don't know what you're shooting at, how can you hit your target? If you're overwhelmed with the forest, then you can't see the trees. then how do you identify those that are really significant? And so what we're seeing is a significant, we're listing a 70% reduction in mean time to repair or remediate, just by having gone through that process of aggregating we talked about earlier. Correlation, again, identifying the relationship with services and possibly using something like service maps, runbook automation, and those kinds of things. It's possible to also for IT to be a little bit more in a sense of having first to know insight into alerts rather than be notified. I was talking to a customer just the other day, and they have a significant issue with in their virtual environment, and the problem really is that they're being notified by their customers. I mean, there's other problems really, but the issue is they're being notified by their customers, and they want to be first to know. And your 60% downtime can be reduced, or excuse me, your downtime can be reduced by 60%, and we identify that. And then number 5 is really a critical item, and that what we're seeing in a lot of our environments is that because there's such a huge body of alerts, because their L1 and even L2 engineers don't always know what's going on, they end up bringing in the senior engineering staff to help wade through that. And the senior engineering staff ends up spending a significant amount of time trying to triage and help them sort out the problems, and they're pulled away from the project that they're assigned to and that they need to be focusing on. So ultimately, our belief is by being able to address in that big body of alerts at the very beginning that it'll make our entire operation much healthier and happier. I think we can go on to the next one, Jim. So this is just a little marketing pitch, in that we have NetEnrich deals with really people, process, and a platform in delivering our services. What we're suggesting is that there's we use Vistara, which is a full lifecycle management platform. It addresses not only alerts and brings everything to a single pane of glass, but it also addresses just the full life cycle of those device elements. And it allows you for identifying the correlation, the relationships that we talked about earlier. It has the automation to be able to do the aggregation and that correlation. And the use of that platform introduces this notion of having a command center whereby IT operations not only has visibility to the state and the condition of devices and infrastructure elements, but it also has the ability to be able to do proactive management of their infrastructure and delivering things like antivirus definition updates, patch management, and even deliver some trending so you can have proactive visibility into the direction that some of your infrastructure elements appear to be trending towards. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this along to back to Jim.
Okay, great. Thanks, Wes. I know we are bumping up to the end of our time limit, so I want to thank everyone for sticking with us. Just a few more brief minutes, but we are sponsored by NetEnrich and Vistara. Wes had mentioned Vistara several times throughout the presentation, but Vistara is really a true unified single pane of glass platform that gives you full coverage control and governance over your infrastructure, including your cloud. So Vistara is a full lifecycle management tool for IT, discovering your assets and monitoring and managing them for really cradle to grave. It is a policy-based and everything from templates to patches into your environment. It takes care and handles all that. It also gives you an unparalleled SPA view of your business and service maps, while it provides automation and really greatly enhances your service capabilities. What NetEnrich does is provides a layer of around-the-clock services to partner with your team and really just take advantage of the visibility Vistara brings to you. NetEnrich is the largest implementator of Vistara, delivering enterprise command center implementations to all of our clients. We also support client agile, DevOps, and some other technologies. We do partner really with some of the best companies in the world. Let me move this over. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for their time today. We hope that you did find this informative. Before I let you go, please, when you get off the call today, ask yourself really 2 questions and take action on these answers. First off, can your team wait to address IT alert fatigue and the potential business risk? As well as what steps can you take now this week to attack fatigue, some of the things that Wes spoke on, regain control, and really reestablish credibility within your organization. So finally, if you're interested, we do offer a free IT landscape assessment and noise assessment as well. Our marketing team will reach out to everyone who attended our call today and answer any additional questions. And obviously, if you have additional questions yourself, feel free to jump into that registration link that we had sent out, and you can contact us that way. So I want to thank everybody for your time, and have a great rest of the week.